When my daughter told me to find somewhere else to die, you're useless now. I packed my bags like the obedient mother I'd always been. 3 days later, I found myself in a lawyer's office, learning that my loving husband had been running a decades-long strategy that would change everything. Victoria was about to realize that sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Let me share how I went from a grieving, homeless widow to the woman holding all the cards. This story has more twists than a pretzel factory. 2 months ago, I was Margaret Sullivan, a loyal wife of 43 years and mother to one deeply ungrateful daughter. When Robert died at 71 from a heart attack, I felt my life collapse. Victoria swooped in during my grief like a vulture in luxury heels, sighing about how hard this must be for me. "Mom, you can't possibly manage this house alone," she'd coo, masking her motives with fake sympathy. "The stairs, the upkeep, all those memories, it's just not good for you." Looking back, I should have recognized the scheme behind her words. Victoria had always been Robert's darling, his little princess. When she married Kevin, an ambitious investment banker, and gave him grandchildren, Robert doted on them endlessly. I was simply the woman keeping the house running, the meals hot, and the life they loved in order. After the funeral, Victoria's tone hardened. She and Kevin began bringing glossy real estate pamphlets and retirement home brochures every time they visited for family dinners. "Mom, these places are perfect," she'd gush. "You'd have friends your age, activities, no stress." What she really meant was no inheritance to fight over, no burden of a mother to manage. The breaking point came last Tuesday. I'd been staying in what Victoria now called our house for 6 weeks, still too heartbroken to pack up our bedroom. That day, she appeared with Kevin and 2 large suitcases. "Mom, we've decided," she announced. "Kevin's promotion means we're moving into town right away. This house suits us perfectly." I blinked at her, stunned. "Move in? This is my home." Her polished mask slipped, exposing the steel beneath. "Actually, Mom, according to Dad's will, everything belongs to me now. The house, the investments, all of it. I let you stay here out of kindness, but it's time for you to find your own place." The words slammed into me. Victoria. There must be some mistake. "No mistake," she said coldly. "Dad knew I'd handle his legacy better than you. You never understood money or investments. You were just the wife. Just the wife. 4 decades of sacrifice dismissed in 3 words. Then came the final dagger. Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." In a daze, I packed 43 years into 2 suitcases and a small box of photographs. Victoria stood at the doorway, scrolling through her phone, tapping her watch impatiently. "There's a senior complex on Maple Street," she said casually, as though recommending a restaurant. "Very affordable." Affordable. My daughter was inheriting $33 million, and her idea of generosity was sending me to a rundown senior home. Kevin loaded my suitcases into their BMW like he was hauling trash. "Margaret, you'll enjoy being independent again," he said, avoiding eye contact. No more taxes or house repairs. No more home, he meant. As we drove away, I watched my house, Robert's house, Victoria's house now, shrink in the rearview mirror. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent over 40 years turning that place into a home, hosting parties, nursing Robert through sickness, and caring for every detail. Now, I was being driven to a budget motel like an unwanted guest who'd long overstayed her welcome. The Sunset Inn was exactly what you'd picture for a $49 a night motel. Paper-thin walls, scratchy towels, and a carpet that had seen better decades. Victoria handed me $200 in cash, like she was tipping a housekeeper. "This should cover a few nights while you get yourself sorted," she said breezily. Kevin will transfer some money into your account once we wrap up Dad's paperwork. Some money. From what she claimed was her inheritance. Once they left, I sat on the sagging bed and tried to comprehend what had just happened. In the span of a single afternoon, I'd gone from grieving widow to a discarded senior citizen. The daughter I'd raised, sacrificed for, and loved more than life itself had tossed me aside like an expired prescription bottle. But as I sat there in that depressing motel room, a nagging thought kept pushing its way forward. Robert had always been obsessively careful with important documents. Years ago, he'd shown me his will, explaining every detail and making sure I understood his wishes. I was absolutely certain that what Victoria told me didn't match what I'd seen. Robert could be old-fashioned, even a little stubborn when it came to finances. But cruel? Never. This was the man who held my hand through my mother's passing, who brought me flowers every anniversary, without fail. He wouldn't have left me with nothing. The next morning, I scraped together bus fare and used the motel's patchy Wi-Fi to search for Robert's longtime attorney, Harrison Fitzgerald. His office was downtown, about a 20-minute bus ride that felt like an investment I couldn't afford, but had to make. Harrison was a distinguished man in his 70s, with kind eyes behind thin, wire-rimmed glasses. When his secretary announced that Mrs. Sullivan was here about her husband's estate, he looked genuinely surprised. "Margaret, my dear," he said warmly, "I was wondering when you'd come in. I tried calling your house several times, but Victoria told me you were traveling." Traveling? My stomach turned at the word. That's what my daughter had told him. "Mr. Fitzgerald," I began carefully, "I need to ask you about Robert's will." He looked puzzled. "Of course. Didn't Victoria give you your copy?" I handed her the original and several duplicates after the reading. The blood drained from my face. "There was a reading?" "Margaret," he said gently, "you were supposed to be there. Victoria said you were too distraught and that she'd handle everything. She promised to make sure you received your inheritance." The room tilted as the truth sank in. "Mr. Fitzgerald," I whispered, "I was never told about any reading. Victoria told me she inherited everything." Harrison's expression darkened from confusion to alarm. He pulled a thick folder from his desk, his movements suddenly sharp. "That's not possible," he said firmly. "Your husband's will is very clear about your inheritance." He opened the folder and slid out a document. I recognized Robert's steady signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. Harrison began reading aloud, and with each sentence, the world I thought I'd known shifted. "I, Robert James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Margaret Ann Sullivan, the following: our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal belongings. Additionally, I leave her 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $23 million. My head spun. $23 million. The house. 70% of everything. Harrison's voice grew sharper as he continued. To my daughter, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, I leave $10 million to be placed in trust, with distributions beginning on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my death, contingent on her treatment of me. Robert had known. He predicted exactly what Victoria would try to do. "Mr. Fitzgerald," I said hoarsely, "Victoria told me I had nothing. She moved into my house. She gave me $200 and suggested I go live in a senior home." Harrison's face flushed with outrage. "Margaret," he said, his tone heavy with anger, "what Victoria has done is called elder abuse and fraud. She's committed multiple felonies, but she had legal paperwork." "She must have shown you forged documents, or maybe an earlier draft," Harrison said firmly. "Your husband updated his will just 6 months before his passing because he was deeply concerned about Victoria's entitlement and her obsession with wealth." The room tilted as his words sank in. I thought back to all the times Victoria had dismissed me at family dinners, talked over me when I tried to join conversations, or rolled her eyes when I asked about their expensive vacations or Kevin's latest business ventures. Robert had been watching. He'd seen it all, and he'd been making decisions. "There's more, Margaret," Harrison continued, his tone sharp but calm. "The trust for Victoria specifically states that if she fails to treat you with dignity after Robert's death, the entire $10 million reverts to you." I froze. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying your daughter just cost herself $10 million, he confirmed. "You now inherit not $23 million, but $33 million, plus the house and every asset attached to it." The irony hit me like a spark. Victoria's greed had triggered the exact clause Robert had put in place to protect me. "What do I do now?" My voice trembled slightly. "Now, my dear," Harrison said, and his eyes softened for the first time since Robert's passing. "We call the police and report the fraud. Then, we call Victoria and let her know she's about to get the shock of her life." I swallowed hard. "Can she fight this?" "With what money?" Harrison asked dryly. "She's about to discover that every account she thought she controlled is frozen. Every investment, every bank account, everything except your house is now locked down pending investigation into her." Harrison's office transformed into mission control for what he cheerfully dubbed Operation Justice. Calls were made to police, banks, and a private investigator. I sat in his leather chair, stunned by the magnitude of Victoria's betrayal. Detective Rodriguez examined the forged will Victoria had given me. "These forgeries are high quality," she said. "This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone invested serious time and resources." "You think Victoria had help?" I asked. "Almost certainly," Rodriguez said. "Whoever did this has knowledge of legal documents and likely financial connections. Kevin, or someone in his circle, might be involved." Within 2 hours, every account was frozen. Victoria's credit cards tied to the inheritance were declined one by one. The utilities she'd already switched to her name were suspended pending verification. At 3:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, where are you?" she demanded, the moment I picked up. "There's some kind of mistake with the bank accounts. They're saying Daddy's assets are frozen." "Hello, Victoria," I said calmly. "I'm sitting in Harrison Fitzgerald's office. You remember him, don't you? Daddy's attorney. The one who read the real will to an empty room while you told him I was traveling." There was silence on the line. "Mom, I don't know what you think they found out, but I found out you're a liar and a thief," I cut her off coldly. "And I also found out your father was far smarter than either of us realized." "You don't understand." Her voice grew shrill. "I was trying to protect you from the stress of handling all that money. You've never had to manage investments." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You forged documents, committed fraud, and threw your 67-year-old mother out of her own home because you thought I was too stupid to notice." "Mom, you're confused," she snapped, her voice turning frantic. "You're grieving. Someone's obviously manipulating you and taking advantage of your emotional state." The audacity was staggering. Even caught red-handed, Victoria was still trying to twist the narrative. "Victoria, darling," I said coldly, "let me make something clear. Not only did you never inherit a cent, but the $10 million your father left for you is now legally mine, thanks to a clause about treating me with dignity and respect." "That's impossible," she gasped. "Detective Rodriguez is sitting right here," I replied evenly. "Would you like to discuss the impossibility of felony fraud charges with her?" Silence. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, scrambling for an escape. "Mom, please, can we meet somewhere and talk this over? I'm sure we can figure something out." "Oh, we'll meet," I said sharply. "At the courthouse when you're arraigned." "You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter." Something cold and resolute settled over me. "Watch me." I ended the call and looked at Harrison, who was smiling with quiet pride. "How soon until she's arrested?" I asked. "Detective Rodriguez has everything she needs for a warrant," he said. "They'll pick her up tonight. And Kevin, his financial records are already being subpoenaed. If he was part of this, he'll face charges too." My phone buzzed with a text. "Mom, please don't do this. Think of the grandchildren." I handed the phone to Detective Rodriguez, who smirked. "Classic emotional manipulation tactics," she muttered. I typed back, "I'm thinking of them. They deserve to see what happens when you steal from family." 20 minutes later, Kevin called. "Margaret, surely we can resolve this quietly," he said smoothly. "Victoria made mistakes, but calling the police is overkill. Kevin, did you help her forge those documents?" "That's not. Margaret, you have to understand. She was under tremendous pressure. She was worried about your mental state and whether you could handle that kind of money." "So that's a yes? It wasn't malicious," he insisted. "She genuinely thought she was protecting you." "By throwing me out of my house and telling me to find somewhere to die?" Kevin went silent. "Kevin, here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're both going to be arrested. You're both going to face federal charges. And I'll be sitting in my home, watching it unfold." "Margaret, please, be reasonable." "I was reasonable for 43 years, I said coldly. "It didn't do me any good." That evening at 8:30, police arrested Victoria during dinner at Leonard, where she'd apparently been celebrating her inheritance with Kevin and another couple. According to Detective Rodriguez, she shrieked about false arrest and demanded her lawyer, who turned out to be one of Kevin's golf buddies with zero criminal law experience. Kevin didn't last much longer. The next morning, officers arrested him at his office. A forensic accountant had traced the fake documents back to a printing company Kevin's firm used for falsified investment materials. My son-in-law, it seemed, had quite the criminal background, one Victoria either ignored or never knew about. That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time in weeks. The master bedroom felt strange now, not because Robert was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as mine. Victoria had moved her belongings in already, cluttering the space with designer dresses and overpriced cosmetics. I packed it all into garbage bags and left them on the porch. She could collect them once she made bail. The house felt different, liberated. For decades, I'd shaped it to Robert's taste, his comfort, his idea of home. But now, standing there with clear eyes, I realized how little of myself I'd allowed into these walls. That was about to change. Around noon, Harrison called with updates. "Victoria's bail is set at $50,000, he said. "With all her accounts frozen, she'll have to find someone else to pay it." "What about Kevin?" I asked. $200,000, Harrison said with a note of satisfaction. The judge wasn't impressed with his history of financial fraud. "Did you know your son-in-law was already under investigation for securities fraud?" Harrison asked. I hadn't known, but in hindsight it wasn't surprising. For years, I'd been excluded from every serious financial discussion. Victoria and Kevin always spoke to me in a patronizing tone, breaking down simple concepts as if I couldn't possibly understand. They were about to see just how wrong they were. "Harrison," I said firmly, "I'd like to make some changes to the house. Victoria already had contractors lined up for renovations. I'd like to move forward, but with my own plans." "An excellent idea," he said warmly. "It's your home now, Margaret. Make it yours." That's exactly what I intended to do. Erase every assumption Victoria had made about my inheritance. She'd wanted to tear out the kitchen, replace the hardwood floors, and turn Robert's beloved study into a wine cellar. Instead, I would create a bright art studio and a cozy library. The ringing of my phone interrupted my thoughts. An unknown number flashed on the screen. "Mrs. Sullivan? This is Janet Cooper from Channel 7 News." A calm, professional voice said, "We understand you're the victim of a major elder fraud case involving your daughter." Would you be willing to share your story? The news was spreading quickly. In a city like this, the arrest of a wealthy investment banker and his wife for defrauding his elderly mother-in-law was headline news. I appreciate your interest, I said carefully, but I'm not ready to go public yet. I completely understand, Janet replied. But your story could help other seniors recognize the signs of family financial abuse. You could save lives. She had a point. How many women my age were silently suffering at the hands of entitled adult children, too ashamed or frightened to speak out? If I agree, I asked, would I have control over how my story is presented? Absolutely, she said confidently. We'd film a sit-down interview and you'd have full approval over the final cut. I pictured Victoria sitting in a holding cell, still convinced this was all a misunderstanding she could charm her way out of. Let me think about it, I said finally. I might have quite a story to tell. That evening, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine Kevin had sent us for Christmas. A bottle I now drank in my own house, paid for with my own money, while deciding whether to humiliate my daughter on national television. The next morning, at exactly 7 a.m., the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Victoria standing on the porch in yesterday's clothes, looking like she had aged years overnight. She had made bail somehow. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Mom, please," she said hoarsely. "You need to talk." "We already talked," I said coldly. "You told me to find somewhere to die. Instead, I found somewhere to live." Her eyes were red and swollen, her usual poise shattered. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "Terrible mistakes. But I'm still your daughter." "Are you?" I asked sharply. "Because daughters don't forge legal documents to steal from their own mothers." "I wasn't stealing," she said quickly, clearly struggling to find words. "You weren't stealing? Then what were you doing, Victoria?" I was trying to protect you," she said weakly, "from making bad financial choices. You've never managed this much money." Even now, after being arrested, she refused to face reality. In her mind, she was still the victim. "Victoria," I said quietly, 6 months before your father died, he told me he was worried about your arrogance, your obsession with money, and the way you treated people you thought were beneath you." She went pale. "Daddy never said that. He said you reminded him of his sister Eleanor. Charming, beautiful, and completely self-absorbed. He changed his will because he was afraid of what you'd do to me if you ever had control." "That's a lie," she spat. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, showing her a paused video. "Actually, it's not. Your father recorded a video message explaining his decision to be played if you ever contested the will or if you treated me poorly after his death." Victoria stared at the phone like it might bite. "He knew, sweetheart," I said softly. "He saw past the polish. The only thing he didn't foresee was how far you'd actually go." "Play it!" she whispered. I tapped the screen. Robert's voice poured into the cool morning. Steady, calm, devastating. "If you're hearing this, Victoria, it means my concerns about your character were justified. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped my daughter had more integrity than I feared. But if Margaret is playing this, you've proven me right in the worst possible way." Victoria sank onto the porch steps while his words kept cutting, precise as a scalpel. "For 43 years, I watched your mother set aside her own dreams, her independence, to care for our family. She worked part-time to help with your tuition while I built the business. She postponed her education, declined opportunities, and poured herself into being the wife and mother she believed we needed." The message ran for 3 more minutes, every line deliberate, slicing through Victoria's excuses and self-deceptions. "By the time you hear this, you'll have learned that mistreating your mother has cost you everything. I hope it was worth it." When it ended, Victoria was sobbing. Not the pretty tears she'd weaponized since childhood, but raw, heaving cries. He hated me, she choked. No, I said. He loved you enough to hope you'd prove him wrong. You chose to prove him right. She looked up, mascara streaking. What happens now? Now you live with the consequences. Fraud charges, an investigation, and the public fallout when this hits the news. I paused. Channel 7 wants to interview me about elder financial abuse. I'm thinking of saying yes. Her face collapsed. Mom, please, think about the kids, about Kevin's career, about our family. I am. I'm also thinking about how none of that mattered to you when you committed multiple felonies. She pushed herself to her feet, suddenly older, smaller. You won't believe this, but I never meant for it to go this far. I wanted the money, the security, the status, to never worry again. For the first time since this began, she told the truth. I believe you, I said. But wanting something doesn't justify wrecking people to get it. What can I do to fix this? Start by admitting it was wrong. Not misguided, not protective, not complicated. Wrong. Completely, unforgivably wrong. Then face what comes next with some dignity instead of trying to manipulate your way out. She studied me, maybe seen for the first time not the pushover mother she'd always exploited, but the woman who had just outplayed her. I deserved this, didn't I? Yes, Victoria, you absolutely did. 3 days after that porch confession, Kevin's mother arrived at my door. Eleanor Hayes was exactly as I'd imagined, impeccably coiffed, dripping in jewelry, and radiating the kind of entitlement that comes from 3 generations of inherited wealth. Margaret, we need to discuss this rationally, she said. I let her in, curious about the narrative the Hayes family had built to excuse felony charges. Eleanor settled into my living room like a monarch granting an audience. Kevin made some poor choices, obviously, but pressing charges feels vindictive, don't you think? Vindictive? I said evenly. Your son helped take my inheritance and threw me out of my own home. Kevin was following Victoria's lead. He didn't understand the full situation. The woman was actually trying to pin her son's crimes on my daughter. I had to give her credit. Her audacity was impressive. Mrs. Hayes, I said firmly, Kevin created forged legal documents. That's not just following someone's lead. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. Kevin's lawyer believes we can negotiate a settlement that benefits everyone, she said smoothly. You get your house back. Victoria faces reasonable consequences, and Kevin avoids the publicity of a trial. Reasonable consequences? I echoed, as if Victoria's crimes were a minor social misstep. What kind of settlement? I asked, my tone sharp. Eleanor's lips curved into a polite smile. Kevin's family is willing to compensate you for this inconvenience. Let's say $2 million in exchange for dropping the charges against Kevin. $2 million. They wanted me to forgive a man who had helped steal $33 million from me for 2. Mrs. Hayes, I said icily, your son was part of a scheme that stripped me of everything I owned. You think $2 million makes that right? Margaret, be realistic, she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. Kevin has a career, a family, a reputation to protect. Sending him to prison helps no one. It serves justice, I said flatly. Her polished mask faltered for the first time. Justice? You're destroying multiple families over money you'd never have known how to manage anyway. There it was. The same arrogance and disdain that had poisoned my relationship with Victoria. In their world, I was just a servant who dared to stand up. Mrs. Hayes, I think we're done here. Margaret, please reconsider. $5 million, final offer. $5 million, a staggering sum. But this wasn't about the money anymore. My answer is no. Eleanor rose, her composure restored, her eyes cold. Very well, but Kevin's legal team has uncovered interesting information about your late husband's business practices. It would be unfortunate if that came out during trial. It was a threat, plain as day. but instead of fear, I felt curiosity. "What kind of information?" I asked evenly. "The kind that might make you question who the real criminal in this situation is," she replied. After she left, I immediately called Harrison. "Margaret," he said calmly, "whatever they think they've found doesn't change the facts of Victoria and Kevin's crimes." "But could it affect the case?" I asked. "Potentially," he admitted. "If they can cast enough doubt, smear Robert's reputation, it could sway a jury." I thought of Robert, of our decades of marriage, and the possibility that I didn't know everything about him. "Harrison, I want to know everything," I said firmly. "Every deal, every client, every irregularity in his business. All of it." "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "Sometimes the past is better left alone. The Hayes family wants to drag Robert's name through the mud to protect their son. I'd rather hear the truth from you first." That evening, I sat in Robert's study, my study now, and began going through his meticulously organized files. Every document was dated, every receipt neatly filed. But the deeper I dug, the more inconsistencies I uncovered. Payments to companies I'd never heard of, exorbitant consulting fees, partnerships with firms that existed only on paper. By midnight, I'd found something that shattered everything I thought I knew about my husband. Harrison referred me to a private investigator named Carol Chen. A sharp eye. "Millions of dollars in illicit funds have been moved through these accounts over the last 10 years. The words struck me like a punch. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Robert was the most honest man I knew." "I'm sorry," Carol said softly, "but the evidence is overwhelming. He was washing money for organized crime, using his legitimate company as a front." I stared at the sea of documents spread across Robert's desk. Invoices for services never rendered. Consulting contracts with companies that didn't exist. Payment schedules that aligned perfectly with known criminal activity reports. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Based on these records," Carol said carefully, "at least 12 years. Likely longer." 12 years. While I was hosting charity galas and planning dinner parties, my husband had been laundering money for criminals. "Sullivan, there's something else," Carol continued. "The $10 million Robert left Victoria came directly from laundered funds. If the FBI traces it, they'll seize everything as criminal proceeds." The room seemed to tilt. "Everything? Your home, the investments, all of it," she said. "Unless," I prompted. Carol hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Unless Victoria and Kevin's attorneys already know about this and are planning to use it as leverage. If they alert the FBI first, they could negotiate immunity in exchange for their cooperation." I stared at her, horrified. My daughter and her husband weren't just thieves. They were sitting on a nuclear weapon. "What are my options?" I asked finally. "Legally, you can approach the FBI yourself," Carol explained. "Come forward voluntarily and hope for leniency. You'd lose most of the assets, but you might keep the house." "If you don't," she sighed, "Victoria and Kevin's lawyers will leak this strategically. You'd lose everything anyway, and possibly face charges for unknowingly profiting from a criminal enterprise." I thought of Eleanor Hayes's smug expression, her certainty I'd caved to their settlement. They'd known all along. "Carol, how did they find out about this?" "Kevin's an investment banker. He would have spotted the patterns in your husband's accounts immediately. The question now is how they'll use that knowledge." My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, we need to meet tonight," she said quickly. "There are things you need to know about Daddy, things that change everything." "I already know, Victoria." Silence. Then, in a cold voice, "You know what? I know about the laundering, the criminal networks. I know everything Dad left us is tainted." She inhaled sharply. "Mom, listen to me. Kevin's lawyers are in contact with the FBI. They're offering us a way out. We can renegotiate." "What kind of renegotiation?" I asked. "Kevin gets immunity in exchange for handing over evidence about Dad's criminal network," she said quickly. "You'd get to keep $5 million and the house. The rest goes to the government. And you? The fraud charges go away. We all walk away from this. It was genius in a cold, sociopathic way. Victoria had managed to twist my moral victory into leverage for herself. So you're asking me to help you profit from your crimes by exploiting your father's crimes, I said flatly. I'm asking you to be practical, she said. If you refuse, you'll lose everything, and you might face charges too. I glanced around Robert's study, really seeing it for the first time. The expensive furniture, the priceless books, the art on the walls, all of it bought with dirty money. I need time to think, I said quietly. Mom, the FBI meeting is tomorrow morning. Kevin's lawyer needs your answer tonight. After hanging up, I sat alone in that office, surrounded by evidence of Robert's double life. 43 years, married to a stranger. A daughter who'd inherited more than his wealth. She'd inherited his ruthlessness. But she'd made one mistake. She'd underestimated me. I picked up the phone. Carol, how fast can you get me a meeting with the FBI? I have a story to tell, and they're going to find it very interesting. The next morning, Agent Sarah Martinez entered Harrison's conference room, looking exactly like she'd been carved out of steel. Sharp eyes, no-nonsense suit, and not an ounce of patience for charm. She sat across from me, recording everything, jotting notes with mechanical precision. Mrs. Sullivan, she said, you understand that by coming forward voluntarily, you're admitting to benefiting from criminal proceeds? I understand, I said firmly. But I'd rather tell you the truth than let my daughter and her husband manipulate this situation to their advantage. I laid out everything. Robert's hidden business, Victoria's fraud scheme, Kevin's forgeries, and the extortion attempt masquerading as a settlement offer. Your daughter believes she can trade information about your husband's crimes for immunity from her own charges. That's exactly what she believes, I confirmed. And she thinks I'll cooperate because I'm afraid of losing everything. For the first time, Agent Martinez smiled. Are you afraid, Mrs. Sullivan? Agent Martinez, 2 weeks ago, I was a grieving widow sleeping in a cheap motel. Now I'm sitting here. Voluntarily confessing to federal agents about my late husband's criminal empire. Fear is no longer my primary emotion. What is then? Anger, I said. Pure, crystallized anger at being manipulated by people who underestimated me for decades. Martinez's smile widened slightly. Mrs. Sullivan, would you be willing to wear a wire? 3 hours later, I was seated in my own living room, a tiny recording device taped to my chest, waiting for Victoria and Kevin to arrive for what they believed was a negotiation. They arrived precisely at 8 p.m., dressed like they were heading to a board meeting. Kevin carried a sleek briefcase, no doubt stuffed with immunity agreements and settlement papers. Mom, you look better than you have in weeks, Victoria said, kissing my cheek as though nothing had happened. I feel better, I replied. Clarity does that. Kevin opened his briefcase with brisk efficiency. Margaret, our lawyers, structured this to be very favorable for you. You keep your house, $5 million in clean assets, and full immunity regarding Robert's activities. Clean assets, I repeated. Interesting phrase. Victoria shot him a sharp look. Mom, the important thing is that we're all protected. We bury the past and move forward. What about the $33 million Robert actually left me? Mom, that money is tainted. It can't be separated from his criminal dealings. Taking $5 million is the best solution. And you two, what's in it for you? Kevin leaned forward smoothly. We put this misunderstanding behind us. Victoria's charges disappear. My reputation stays intact, and we all get a fresh start. Misunderstanding. I let out a bitter laugh. You're calling felony fraud a misunderstanding? Margaret, let's stay focused, Kevin said evenly. No, I said sharply. Let's not. Tell me, Kevin, when did you first discover Robert's crimes? Before or after marrying Victoria? Or was it while you were plotting to steal my inheritance? They exchanged a quick, uneasy glance. Margaret, I don't think that's relevant, Kevin tried. It's very relevant, I snapped. Because if you knew and stayed quiet, you're an accessory. And if you only found out while committing your own crimes, you're just unlucky. Victoria shifted nervously. Mom, what are you getting at? I'm saying this wasn't spur of the moment. The forged will, the discovery of Robert's laundering, your connections to forgers, this was all carefully planned. That's ridiculous, Kevin barked. Is it? I asked calmly. Agent Martinez doesn't think so. Both of them froze. Agent Martinez, Kevin whispered. FBI, I confirmed. She's very interested in elder abuse, fraud, extortion, and especially how you tried to blackmail me with Robert's crimes. Kevin shot up from his chair, reaching for his briefcase. Margaret, this meeting is over. No, Kevin, I said coldly. It's just starting. Right on cue, Agent Martinez and 2 other agents entered my home. Kevin's briefcase and both their phones were seized immediately. Victoria Sullivan Hayes and Kevin Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. Victoria turned to me with an expression of absolute betrayal. Mom, how could you do this to your own family? The same way you forged legal documents and stole my inheritance, sweetheart, I replied calmly, except my way is legal. As the agents secured the cuffs, Kevin made one last desperate attempt. Margaret, you don't understand what you've done. There are people connected to Robert's business who won't appreciate this federal attention. You've put yourself in danger. Agent Martinez froze mid-sentence, fixing Kevin with an icy stare. Mr. Hayes, are you threatening a federal witness? I'm warning her about reality, Kevin snapped. She doesn't understand what she's walking into. The reality, Martinez said coldly, is that you've just added witness intimidation to your charges. Once they were taken out of the house, Agent Martinez sat back down. Mrs. Sullivan, she said carefully, Kevin's warning might not be entirely without merit. Your husband had ties to some very dangerous people. My voice was steady. How dangerous? The Torino crime family, she said. They've been laundering money through legitimate companies for decades. Your husband's consulting firm was one of their most trusted operations. The name meant nothing to me, but her expression said it all. Are you telling me I'm in physical danger? Potentially, she admitted, but there's more you need to know about Robert's work. Something that changes everything. Martinez opened a thick file and placed it on the table. Your husband wasn't just laundering money for the Torinos, she said. He was an FBI informant. For 12 years, he worked deep undercover, appearing to facilitate their laundering network while secretly helping us dismantle it. The world tilted. Robert, an informant. A life I'd never even glimpsed. This operation was so sensitive, she continued, that even many FBI offices weren't briefed. Robert's intel was instrumental in building cases against several crime syndicates. I swallowed hard. And the money? The millions he left me? It's legally yours, Martinez confirmed. We allowed him to keep a percentage of the laundered funds to maintain cover and compensate him. His cooperation led to 47 arrests and over $200 million in seized assets. Everything he left you is clean. I sat frozen, unable to reconcile the husband I'd known with this revelation. Why wasn't I told? The investigation was ongoing, Martinez explained, and frankly, we weren't sure of your involvement. Ironically, your daughter and son-in-law's fraud scheme helped prove your innocence. I let out a hollow laugh. So they were trying to blackmail me with evidence that would have cleared Robert's name? She nodded. They didn't know the truth. They thought they'd found leverage. Instead, they incriminated themselves. The irony was perfect. Victoria had tried to take everything from me. Twice. Both times she'd only ensured her own downfall. What happens now? I asked quietly. You'll get your assets back, Martinez said. Victoria and Kevin will face federal charges. You can start over, knowing your inheritance is legitimate. And as for the Torinos, they'll be far too busy with indictments and raids to focus on you. We're executing search warrants in 3 states tomorrow morning. I glanced around my living room, once the scene of humiliation and betrayal, now the symbol of my victory. Agent Martinez, can I ask you something? Of course. In your opinion, am I a terrible person for feeling satisfied about Victoria's arrest? Martinez smiled softly. Mrs. Sullivan, in my professional opinion, you're a woman who refused to be victimized. That's not terrible. That's inspiring. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my renovated house, making coffee for two. The morning sun streamed through new windows that actually opened properly, illuminating countertops I'd chosen myself for the first time in 43 years. Good morning, Margaret. Dr. Sarah Chen, Carol's sister and now my trusted financial advisor, appeared in the doorway, carrying a thick binder of reports. Good morning, Sarah. Ready for our quarterly review? The past 6 months had been a whirlwind, court hearings, media appearances, and a transformation I'd never imagined. Victoria and Kevin were each serving 18-month federal prison sentences. The sensational coverage of their crimes had unexpectedly made me a well-known advocate for elder justice. Your portfolio is performing excellently, Sarah said, settling at the sleek new breakfast table I'd chosen myself. The charitable foundation is fully operational, and the scholarship fund has already selected its first recipients. The Margaret Sullivan Foundation for Elder Protection had become my passion. I'd committed $15 million to fund legal aid for seniors suffering financial abuse by family members and to support laws strengthening elder protections. Any word on the documentary? I asked. Netflix confirmed the deal, Sarah said with a smile. They want to begin filming next month. My story had captivated audiences far beyond the initial headlines. The Mother's Revenge, an American crime story, was in production, with all profits directed to elder advocacy causes. And Victoria? I asked, noticing Sarah's expression shift. She's written again, Sarah said softly. Her lawyer says she wants to apologize and ask for forgiveness. Victoria had sent me 17 letters from prison. I'd read the first few, filled with excuses, then desperation, before I stopped opening them. Some relationships couldn't be repaired with ink and paper. Sarah, I said, has my stance on that changed? Not according to what you've told me, she replied carefully. But people do change, Margaret. Even those who've made terrible decisions. I thought of the woman I'd been half a year ago, grieving, dependent, grateful for any scraps of dignity my family threw my way. That version of me might have felt obligated to forgive, to rebuild what was broken out of guilt. But that woman no longer existed. Schedule a meeting with Victoria's lawyer, I said. Not to reconcile, just to make things clear. What kind of thing? Sarah asked. I want Victoria to understand her actions have consequences beyond a prison sentence. I want her to know she destroyed our relationship forever, and that her children will grow up knowing why their mother went to prison. That's harsh. Good, I said. It's meant to be harsh. Victoria made adult choices that hurt the people she was supposed to love. Letters won't erase that. Sarah nodded and scribbled notes in her leather portfolio. And the grandchildren? She asked gently. Victoria's requested supervised visits with them. My relationship with her kids will depend on their choices when they're grown, not her rehabilitation campaign. The doorbell rang, and I glanced out the window to see a delivery truck with a large crate. Must be the new furniture for the studio, I told Sarah. Transforming Robert's dark den into an airy, sunlit art studio had been my favorite project. It was where I'd rediscovered my passion for painting, something I'd abandoned when I married, and slipped quietly into the role of dutiful wife and mother. Margaret, Sarah said hesitantly, may I ask something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret how this all unfolded? The prison sentences, the media frenzy, the estrangement? I considered her words as I signed for my delivery. 6 months earlier, I'd been invisible. A widowed woman with no home, no savings, and no future. Now I was a millionaire philanthropist, with a thriving foundation, a documentary deal, and a purpose that went beyond just survival. Sarah, my daughter, tried to strip me of everything I had and leave me with nothing. My son-in-law forged legal documents and threatened to blackmail me. They revealed exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless, but they're still family. No, I said firmly, they're still DNA. Family are the people who protect you when you're vulnerable, not the ones who exploit your pain for profit. Sarah closed her portfolio with a small nod, seemingly satisfied with my answer. Besides, I added, look what I became when I stopped letting them define my worth. After Sarah left, I wandered through the house. Truly my house now, decorated in colors I loved, organized to fit my life. In my art studio, sunlight streamed over my newest painting, a self-portrait of a woman standing in brilliant light, her face turned toward the future. That woman didn't resemble the grieving widow who'd packed her entire life into 2 suitcases 6 months ago. She looked strong, independent, fearless. She looked like someone who had discovered that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be. Outside, the sun dipped behind trees I'd planted myself, roots settling into soil that was finally mine. Not because I inherited it, not because someone gave it to me, but because I'd fought for it with intelligence and courage. Tomorrow, I'd keep building the life I chose, not the one others tried to script for me. And if Victoria ever wanted a relationship with this version of me, she'd have to bring a lot more than prison letters and empty apologies. She'd need a transformation as profound as mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.